For those of you who are always on the go, remember mindful moments.
Bite-sized knowledge, right?
Exactly. Perfect for those mental snacks throughout the day. Narrated by AI, too. Ever feel like you're on the outside looking in, like society has these neat little boxes and you just don't quite fit?
Yeah.
Well, we're diving into a book today that throws those boxes right out the window.
Mm-hmm.
S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders.
Oh, a classic.
It's told through the eyes of Ponyboy Curtis, a teenager growing up in a world divided by social lines. But what's fascinating is that the lines aren't as clear as they seem.
Yeah, it's like looking at a cracked mirror. You see the divisions, the Greasers, the Socs, but the reflections are distorted.
Right.
We assume we know who's good and who's bad based on appearances and social standing, but Hinton flips that script.
Right from the start,
Yeah.
we're thrown into Ponyboy's world, the Greasers.
Yeah.
He describes it as a place where a rumble, a fight, is almost like a social event, a way of life. But he also talks about the sunsets, these moments of beauty they all share, even the Socs. It's a contradiction that makes you think.
That's what's so clever about Hinton's writing. She doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of poverty violence, the constant threat that the Greasers live under. But she also shows us their humanity, their loyalty to each other, their dreams.
Like when Ponyboy gets jumped by those Socs just for walking home from the movies.
Right, yeah.
They threaten him with a knife, call him white trash. But it's not just about the violence, is it?
No.
It's about the dehumanization, the way they see him as a label, not a person.
Absolutely. That scene sets the stage for everything that follows. It's a microcosm of the societal forces at play.
Yeah.
These kids are trapped in a system that tells them who they are, who they should hate, and it's almost impossible to break free.
But then we meet Cherry Valance, a sock girl.
Hmm.
And something unexpected happens. Ponyboy connects with her. They talk about books, sunsets, things that seem to transcend their social divide.
What's so powerful about their relationship is that it challenges our preconceived notions.
Right.
Here's the Sock, supposedly the enemy, and she sees Ponyboy for who he is, intelligent, sensitive, a bookworm. She even says, things are rough all over, acknowledging that pain and hardship aren't limited by social class.
It's a turning point for Ponyboy. He starts to see the Socs not as a monolithic group, but as individuals with their own complexities.
Right.
And it makes you wonder if someone from each side can find common ground. Why can't everyone?
That's the heart of Hinton's message. I think she's not offering easy solutions, but she's forcing us to confront the assumptions we make about people based on their labels.
Right.
She's asking, what if we all looked a little deeper beyond the surface?
And then, of course, things take a dark turn with the fight in the park.
Oh, yeah.
The tension that's been simmering explodes, and Johnny, trying to protect Ponyboy, ends up killing Baba Sock.
This is where the book really digs into the consequences of violence, the cyclical nature of fear and prejudice.
Yeah.
Johnny, terrified, outnumbered, lashes out. It's a tragedy, but it's also a symptom of the world they live in.
Hinton doesn't shy away from the brutality of that moment. She describes Bob's lifeless body in the moonlight. The blood, the shock.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that actions have consequences and sometimes there's no going back.
It's also important to note the loyalty that emerges in the aftermath. Dally, the toughest of the Greasers, risks everything to help Ponyboy and Johnny escape.
Yeah.
He becomes their lifeline even though he's battling his own demons.
It makes you realize that even in this harsh world, there's this deep sense of brotherhood, of looking out for your own.
Absolutely.
But it also makes you question what cost.
That's the dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dally's loyalty, his love for Johnny, ultimately leads to his own downfall. He can't cope with the loss, and he ends up making a reckless choice that costs him his life.
Right.
It's a tragic end for a character who, deep down, was searching for something more.
His death leaves a huge hole in the group, but it also allows Johnny's legacy to live on. His final words to Ponyboy, "Stay gold," become a powerful symbol of hope, a reminder to hold on to that innocence, that goodness, even in the face of darkness.
It's a message that resonates far beyond the pages of the book. It's a message for all of us, especially those who feel like outsiders, to hold on to our ideals, to fight for what we believe in, and to never let the world harden our hearts.
I think we need a moment to let all of that sink in. This first part of our deep dive has already been incredibly insightful, and I can't wait to see where this conversation takes us next.
You know, one thing that struck me about those final words of Johnny Stay Gold is how they tie into another recurring motif in the book Sunsets.
Oh, absolutely. That's something I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Ponyboy and Cherry, a sock. They bond over sunsets. these moments of beauty that seem to exist outside their divided world.
Right.
It's almost like a visual representation of that gold Johnny's talking about.
Exactly. And it's not just a pretty image. Hinton is doing something really interesting here.
Yeah.
She's showing us how, even in a world defined by conflict, there are these shared experiences that connect us, that remind us of our common humanity.
And it makes you wonder if these kids can find that connection, that sense of wonder amidst the violence and the poverty. What's stopping the rest of us from doing the same?
It's a challenge, isn't it? Because those societal barriers, those labels we put on each other, they're not just external, they become internalized. Look at Ponyboy's relationship with Derry, his older brother.
Right at the beginning, we see Derry as this tough, almost unfeeling figure. He's strict. He pushes Ponyboy hard, and we understand why Ponyboy misinterprets that as a lack of love.
But as the story unfolds, and especially after the tragedy in the park, we see a different side of Derry.
Yeah.
There's that scene where Ponyboy sees him crying, and it just shatters his perception.
Right.
He realizes Derry's toughness is born out of love, out of the sacrifices he's made to keep their family together.
It's a powerful moment because it shows how easily we can misjudge people based on limited perspectives.
Right.
Ponyboy, trapped in his own teenage angst, couldn't see the depth of Derry's love.
Yeah.
It took a crisis, a near-death experience, to shake him out of that limited view.
And it's not just Ponyboy. We see a similar shift in Randy, one of the Socs who jumped Ponyboy earlier in the book.
Yeah.
He comes to Ponyboy after Bob's death, and he's not looking for revenge. He's looking for understanding.
I was so struck by Randy's confession that the Socs were looking for a fight that night, that they were the instigators.
Right.
It takes a lot of courage to admit that, especially to someone from the other side.
That scene really highlights Hinton's refusal to paint the Socs as simply the villains.
Right.
Yes, they have privilege, they have power, but they're also individuals grappling with their own insecurities, their own pressures. Randy's willingness to acknowledge his role in the tragedy shows a capacity for growth, for empathy that we don't always associate with the privileged group.
It makes you wonder how many of our own prejudices are based on similar misperceptions. How often do we fail to see the individual because we're blinded by the label?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves, and I think that's what makes The Outsiders such a timeless and important book. It's not just a story about teenagers in the 1960s. It's a story about human nature, about the dangers of division and the possibility of finding connection, even in the most unlikely of places.
And ultimately, it's a story about hope. Despite the tragedy, despite the loss, Ponyboy chooses to tell his story. He chooses to use his experience to bridge the gap between the Greasers and the Socs.
That act of writing, of sharing his truth, is a powerful act of rebellion against the system that tried to define him. He's reclaiming his narrative, and in doing so, he's offering us a way forward, a way to break down those barriers and create a more just and compassionate world.
And the way Hinton uses language throughout the book really amplifies that message.
Absolutely.
She doesn't shy away from slang, from the unique way these kids talk, and that gives the story such authenticity and power.
Absolutely. That first-person narration from Ponyboy's perspective pulls you right into his world.
Yeah.
You feel his fear, his anger, his love for his brothers and friends. It makes the story so much more than just a plot. It becomes an experience.
It's a story that stays with you long after you finish reading it. But I have to admit, there's one question that keeps nagging at me. If we were to step into Ponyboy's shoes for a moment, if we were to truly experience his world, do you think we would come out unchanged?
That's a really interesting question. To walk through those dark streets, to feel the weight of prejudice and fear, to experience the loss of someone like Johnny. I think it would be impossible to remain untouched by those things.
Right. It makes you wonder, would we have the strength to stay gold? Or would the world, with all its harshness, tarnish that innocence?
It's a question worth pondering, isn't it? And maybe that's part of Hinton's point. She's not offering us easy answers, but she's challenging us to confront these uncomfortable truths, to examine our own biases, and to imagine what it might be like to walk in someone else's shoes.
This deep dive has really opened up new layers of meaning in The Outsiders. I'm eager to hear your final thoughts as we wrap things up in our last part. Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into The Outsiders, and I have to say this book has really gotten under my skin.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that stays with you.
It makes you think about the world differently, about your own place in it.
Exactly.
And that question we ended with about whether we could stay gold if we walked in Ponyboy shoes, that's a tough one.
It is, and I don't think there's a simple answer, but maybe that's the point.
Right.
The Outsiders isn't about providing answers. It's about asking questions, about challenging us to look deeper. Like how much of our perception of others is based on stereotypes, on those labels we attach to people.
Yeah.
The Greasers, the Socs, they both had these preconceived notions about each other, and it fueled so much of the conflict.
And those labels, those societal divisions, they don't just exist in the book. They're all around us in different forms. We see it in the way we talk about race, class, religion, even political affiliation.
Right.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of us versus them thinking, and that's what makes Ponyboy's journey so powerful. He starts out with those same prejudices, but through his experiences, through his relationships with people like Cherry and Randy, he begins to see the humanity in those he was taught to hate.
His transformation isn't about denying the differences that exist. It's about recognizing that those differences don't have to define us. They don't have to dictate how we treat each other.
And it's not just about individuals changing, it's about challenging the systems that create and perpetuate those divisions. The poverty, the lack of opportunity, the violence that plagues the Greasers' world, those aren't just personal failings, they're systemic issues.
Exactly. Hinton is showing us how these forces shape people's lives, how they trap them in cycles of poverty and violence. And she's challenging us to ask, what can we do to break those cycles? How can we create a society where everyone has a chance to thrive regardless of their background?
It's a lot to think about, but I think those are the conversations we need to be having. The Outsiders may be a work of fiction, but it's a mirror reflecting back on our own world, our own biases, our own responsibility to do better.
And it's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. Ponyboy's decision to tell his story, to use his voice to shed light on the injustices he's witnessed, that's a powerful act of resistance.
It's a message that resonates today, maybe even more so than when the book was first published. We're living in a time where those divisions feel so stark, so entrenched. But Ponyboy's story reminds us that change is possible, one story, one connection, one act of empathy at a time.
And those stories, those connections, they have the power to transform us. They can challenge our assumptions, broaden our perspectives, and inspire us to create a world where there are fewer outsiders and more individuals who are seen, heard, and valued for who they truly are.
I love this deep dive has been such a powerful reminder of the impact literature can have. The Outsiders isn't just a story, it's a call to action, a challenge to look beyond the labels, to fight for justice, and to never stop believing in the possibility of a better world.
And even though our deep dive is ending, the conversation doesn't have to do. I hope this discussion inspires you to pick up the book, to share it with others, and to continue exploring these themes in your own life.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for more thought-provoking deep dives like this, be sure to subscribe to our show, share this episode, and maybe even pick up a copy of The Outsiders through the link in our show notes. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep seeking those truths that lie beneath the surface.